Hello everyone, welcome for this session of pathophysiology, and we are continuing from where we had stopped from the previous lectures, and today we are going to look at inflammation. And inflammation, we are going to look at the definition of key terms related to inflammation and tissue repair. By the end of this session also, we shall be able to explain the basic principles of the inflammatory response. Then we shall also be able to differentiate between acute and chronic inflammation and provide examples of each case, as in the examples of acute and chronic inflammatory responses or inflammation. Then we shall be able to discuss the mechanism of tissue repair, that includes the regeneration and fibrosis, and also be able to explain the potential complications of inflammation and tissue repair. So to start with, inflammation is a complex biological response triggered by the immune system to protect itself from harmful stimuli such as pathogens, irritants, or damaged cells. So here we are saying that when our cells or tissues are afflicted with the stimuli, the immune system or the body's immune system responds by inflammation, responds by producing an inflammatory response to try and protect itself. And here there are several factors that may lead to an inflammatory response, and inflammation removes damaged cells, irritants or pathogens, and initiate healing. So in order for these cells to remain free to fight and prevent these stimuli, they also help the body in removing damaged cells, in removing irritants, those stimuli, or the pathogens that may be able to cause an infection, and also by so doing it will be initiating healing. So what could be the signs and symptoms of the inflammatory response? So one of the cardinal signs is the presence of swelling. There is swelling at the site of inflammation. So when a damaged tissue is inflamed, it must also be swollen. So an inflammation may be represented by the presence of swelling at the site of inflammation or the site of injury. Then that site where inflammation is becomes red and also becomes painful, and these may be associated with the diseases such as arthritis, neurological diseases. The signs of inflammation, as I had earlier said, there is rubor, that is redness at the site, tumor or swelling, there is heat and pain and loss of function. So when these damaged cells are afflicted by a stimuli and the immune system responds by inflammation, the following must be or may exist. Not all of them, but some of them will exist, and these include redness, swelling, heat, pain, and loss of function. So what causes inflammation? So as earlier said, inflammation being a complex biological response triggered by the body's immune system to protect itself from harmful stimuli such as pathogens, irritants, or damaged cells. Several factors can lead to this to occur, and these factors, the one we are calling irritants or stimulants, could be one, infections. So pathogens like bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites can invade the body, triggering an immune response. And this response includes the release of various inflammatory mediators such as cytokines and chemokines, which recruit the immune cells to the site of infection to fight off the invading pathogens. So, as we are aware that the immune system is that part of the body that is responsible for recognition and protecting the body from the invading non-cells of the body. So when these microorganisms or the pathogens invades the body, the immune response has that identity of recognizing between self and non-self. It has that special ability to recognize what cells belongs to the body and what cells do not belong to the body, so that it can be able to recruit antibodies to fight against the non-self cells, which could be either bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, and in so doing they recruit antibodies to come and fight. So we are saying this fight leads to inflammation, and this leads to release of various inflammatory mediators, as these can be cytokines and chemokines, which recruit immune cells to the site of infection to fight off the invading pathogens. So that is one of the causes of inflammation. In other words, when a cell becomes inflamed, it could be either infections. So another cause of inflammation could be tissue injury or trauma, where physical injury like burns, cuts, or other forms of tissue damage can activate the inflammatory response, where damaged cells release molecules called damage-associated molecular patterns, the ones we can abbreviate as DAMPs, which alert the immune system to the presence of the injury. So when these damaged cells releases these molecules, the ones that we are calling damage-associated molecular patterns, these molecules will alert the immune system to the presence of injury. When a cell is damaged, the damaged cells releases molecules called damage-associated molecule patterns, which will alert the immune system to the presence of injury. This leads to the release of inflammatory mediators and the recruitment of immune cells to the damaged tissues to initiate repair process. Therefore, this could be one of the causes of inflammation, and we are saying these chemical mediators may include cytokines and chemokines that could be recruited to the site of injury. So that is the second cause of inflammation, tissue injury or trauma. So if it is not infection, it may be tissue injury or trauma. So the third cause could be allergic reactions. So allergens such as pollen, certain foods or onset or insect venom can trigger an allergic response in susceptible individuals. And allergens are perceived as foreign invaders by the immune system, leading to the release of inflammatory responses or inflammatory substances like histamines and other chemicals, resulting in symptoms such as swelling, redness, and itching. So people may also get their tissues being inflamed because of the presence of allergens. We have people that are allergic, such as people who have asthma, people who react to certain chemicals. So the presence of these allergens or triggering factors such as certain type of food or insect venom can trigger an allergic response in a susceptible individual. A susceptible individual is that individual that is at risk for a certain condition. So in this case, susceptible individuals to allergic reactions are those individuals that are at risk of having allergic reactions whenever a triggering factor is encountered. So we are saying the body, when it encounters these foreign particles or allergen factors, the body perceives them as invaders, and therefore, as I had said, the immune system sees them as non-particles which should not be within the body, and therefore there is need to fight against them. So this leads to the release of inflammatory substances like histamine and other chemicals, resulting in symptoms such as swelling. For example, like in asthma, there is swelling within the respiratory tract, there is redness and itching, so which we have seen as signs of inflammation. Another cause of inflammation, in addition to pathogens, in addition to tissue injuries, in addition to allergic reactions, then we have the fourth one as autoimmune disorders. So in autoimmune diseases, the immune system mistakenly attacks health tissues in the body. So when the immune system really doesn't recognize self from non-self, it ends up attacking its own cells. So the immune system mistakenly attacks health tissues in the body, and this attack leads to inflammation and tissue damage. For example, immune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and multiple sclerosis. In these conditions, the immune system produces antibodies and inflammatory mediators that target and damage the body's own tissues. So even if we have a microorganism that has entered the body and damaged the tissue, and the immune system releases, or the immune system recognizes that there is an invader, so when it is trying to respond by recruiting chemokines or inflammatory mediators and antibodies, those cells of the immune system aggressively and mistakenly attacks even the normal cells of the body, ending up causing inflammation at the site where these microorganisms could be, or even in other areas where these microorganisms could not be occupying. So the next one, apart from autoimmune disease, could be chronic conditions. So certain chronic conditions such as obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases are associated with low-grade inflammation throughout the body, where chronic inflammation can result from various factors including excess fat tissues, metabolic dysfunction, and oxidative stress. And this persistent inflammation contributes to the development and progression of these diseases. So another cause could be environmental factors, where exposure to environmental pollutants, toxins, cigarette smoke, and other harmful substances can trigger inflammatory response in the body. These substances can directly damage cells and tissues, therefore leading to the release of inflammatory mediators and activation of the immune system. So we are saying that exposure to chemicals in the environment can also trigger an inflammatory response. A case in point could be exposure of smoke from the cigarette, and could be even other substances either from industries that one may inhale, and this goes to irritate the tissues and trigger an inflammatory response. And these triggers may also, these triggering factors may also cause damage directly to the cells and tissue cytokines that could activate the immune system. However, all having said, as in summary, we have said that the cause of inflammation is not limited to one factor. It is amalgamation of factors that ranges from the presence of infections, damage to the tissues, exposure to the environment by toxins, cigarette smoke, and it could be also due to the presence of chronic factors. And the overall inflammation is a complex process influenced by various factors, including infections, as I've seen, injury, immune dysfunction, like we said, autoimmune disorders, and environmental exposures. And therefore, as pathophysiologists, understanding the cause of inflammation is very crucial, as it will help us in developing effective treatment and interventions to manage inflammatory disorders and promote health and well-being, and to be able to prevent them or avoid them. For example, restricting or avoiding triggering factors. For the case of those that are reactive to triggering factors, allergic factors, we are able to do what? To avoid them. So, to continue with our session from the causes of inflammation, what could be the components of inflammation? So, inflammation involves a complex interplay of various components of the immune system, and each of these interplays play distinct roles in the process of inflammation. However, as pathophysiologists or as students studying pathophysiology, the key components of inflammation and their roles include the following. The first one is the inflammatory mediators. So the inflammatory mediators, we are saying they are factors or substances that mediates the inflammation process, that makes the inflammation process go on or make the inflammation process happen. And these inflammatory mediators include cytokines. So what are cytokines? The cytokines are small proteins released by immune cells that regulate inflammation by promoting or suppressing the immune response. So when the immune response is so aggressive, when the immune system aggressively responds to the invader or to the triggering factor, the inflammatory mediators called the cytokines is there to suppress. A case in point is when we have autoimmune disorders, we need immune suppressants to prevent excessive damage. And an example, it may include tumor necrosis factor alpha, the ones we call TNF alpha. We have interleukins and interferons. So these chemical mediators or these cytokines will be able to regulate the inflammation process. They will be able to regulate the immune system and be able to control how the body reacts when it is encountered with a triggering factor. The next one is the chemokines. So chemotactic cytokines attract immune cells to the site of inflammation. So the chemokines are responsible for attracting the immune cells to the site of inflammation. Remember, we have said that inflammation may occur as a result of tissue damage or as a result of infection. Therefore, the body responds by producing chemical mediators or inflammatory mediators which will attract the immune system specifically at the site of inflammation to come and counteract the effect of the triggering factor. And this attraction to the site of infection or to the site of tissue injury is done by inflammatory mediators known as chemokines. Then we have under inflammatory mediator another mediator known as prostaglandins. So prostaglandins are lipid compounds derived from arachidonic acid that contribute to inflammation by inducing vasodilation, which vasodilation increases vascular permeability and sensitizing pain receptors. And that is the reason why we have seen that one of the signs of inflammation is pain at the site of inflammation, and this could be triggered by an inflammatory mediator known as prostaglandins. And how does it do that? We are saying for it induces vasodilatation, which increases vascular permeability and sensitizes pain receptors. It sensitizes pain receptors, and one is able now to feel pain at the site of inflammation. So another component is the immune cells. So we are saying one of the components of the inflammation or inflammatory responses we have inflammatory mediators, and the inflammatory mediators we have talked about something like cytokines, chemokines, and prostaglandins. Then we also have immune cells. So the immune cells are those special cells that are responsible for protecting the body against invaders, and these may include one, the neutrophils, which is the first responder to inflammation, and these neutrophils migrate to the site of injury or infection, where they are responsible for engulfing and destroying pathogens through a process called phagocytosis. So when there is an inflammation or when there is an injury, the first immune cell that reaches the site of injury is the neutrophils, and for it, its role is engulfing and destroying pathogens which could be the cause of the injury or the cause of inflammation, and therefore this engulfing and destruction of this pathogen we are calling a process as phagocytosis. Hope we are together and we are able to continue. So the second immune cell is the macrophage. So macrophages are phagocytic cells that are responsible for engulfing and digesting pathogens, debris, and dead cells. So the macrophages also release cytokines and chemokines to regulate inflammation and promote tissue repair. The next immune cell is the monocytes. So the circulating precursor cells that differentiate into macrophages upon migration to tissues. And we have also the lymphocytes. So in the lymphocytes we have the T and the B lymphocytes, and these are involved in adaptive immunity and play roles in modulating the inflammatory response, and the T cells regulate the activity of other immune cells, where B cells produce antibodies to target pathogens. For the B cells, they are specific altogether. So, and this is very important to note that these immune cells are very crucial. For example, we have laboratory tests that we can do to detect whether we have an infection depending on the type of cells that have been identified. For example, when we are doing a CBC, complete blood count, we have to come up with the differentials of white blood cell count. The white blood cell count will include numbers of neutrophils, macrophages, monocytes, lymphocytes, and by assessing the quantity of these immune cells in the body will tell us that there is an infection. And that's why, as pathophysiology students, we should be able to note that. So, we also have mast cells. So, mast cells are tissue-resident immune cells that release histamine and other inflammatory mediators in response specifically to injury, infections, or allergens, and they contribute to the early stages of inflammation. How? By inducing vasodilation and increasing vesicular permeability. So we have seen that these mast cells are tissue resident of the immune cells that release histamines and other inflammatory mediators in response to injury, infection, or allergens. A case in point is in asthma. So the mast cells produces histamines, and these histamines are triggered by allergens. The allergens could either be pollen grains, could either be dust, could either be cold air that contributes to an allergic reaction. And we are saying it is because the immune cells identifies either the dust or the infection in the respiratory system, and they act by causing an inflammatory response by contributing to the early stages of inflammation. How? By inducing vasodilation and increasing permeability of the vessels. So, the next could be plasma proteins. And these plasma proteins have acute phase proteins that are produced by the liver in response to inflammation. So the plasma proteins are also components of inflammation. And with these plasma proteins, we have those that act on acute phase proteins. And these acute phase proteins are produced by the liver in response to inflammation. And the acute phase proteins like the C-reactive protein, the CRP, and the fibrinogen contribute to the systemic inflammatory response. In case someone has a systemic inflammatory response, in systemic response where we have reactions or where we have inflammation within the whole system of the body, then the plasma proteins takes over, and for this it is the acute phase protein that is responsible for systemic inflammatory response. Then we also have complement proteins. So the complement protein, it is part of the innate immune system. Innate, I mean natural immune system, the immune system that one is born with. That the complement proteins enhances the immune response by promoting phagocytosis, inducing inflammation, and forming membrane attack complexes to lyse pathogens. The second, another component is vasculature. So the blood vessels also forms the components of inflammation, because these blood vessels play a crucial role in inflammation by facilitating the recruitment of the immune cells to the site of injury or infection. So without the blood vessels, Without the good blood vessels, we shall not have adequate blood flow or adequate blood supply to the site of injury. This means if an injured area has less blood vessel supply, then we shall have low blood volume supply to the site of injury. And remember that these immune cells are carried and transported within blood, of which the blood is transported within the blood vessels. And we are saying during inflammation, vasodilatation or vasodilation increases blood flow to the affected area. And while increasing vascular permeability, it allows the immune cells and the plasma protein to extravasate from the blood streams to the tissue where microorganisms could be hiding, and also causing phagocytosis of these triggering factors and enhance tissue repair. So, as we have come to the end of our components of inflammation, these components work together in a coordinated manner to eliminate pathogens, remove damaged cells and debris, and also initiate tissue repair process during inflammation. However, dysregulation of the inflammatory responses can lead to chronic inflammation and contribute to pathogenesis of various diseases. Therefore, it means that these components do not work without coordination. There is a series of events they must follow, one occurring after the other, because they carry different roles, and therefore they should have a work plan. They should have occurrence in harmony. They should occur in an orderly manner, and this orderly manner will necessitate the normal inflammatory process. However, if there is no harmony, if there is dysregulation of the inflammatory response, then this can lead to chronic inflammation and contribute to pathogenesis of various diseases. Abnormal regulation or abnormal inflammation therefore can result into formation of other diseases that may result into life-threatening to our body cells.